Hey, what's up guys? This is International Master Squarology with part 2 of the game between Amos Byrne and Alexander Alekhine. Alright, so this is the part where we left off. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend you do that. Okay, so here, White took back on g4 and he's threatening to play f5. It's a threat because if he can play f5, then he'll be able to turn this guy into a passed pawn. It'll be a protected passed pawn. This pawn will become weak. White will be able to attack it even more. For example, like this. And then the knight will have to go back. And when the knight goes back, the king doesn't have to defend c3 anymore, so he can start going places like to the queen side, maybe going here, and then attacking over there on the queen side, or attacking on the king side, like going maybe here. Okay, so Alekhine stopped that with g6. But now this is the problem with Black's position. He has weak squares, and he has pawns on those weak squares. g6 and h6 are weak squares. A weak square, by the way, is a square that cannot be protected by a pawn. See, pawns cannot protect these squares, so they're weak squares. What White's going to do is he's going to maneuver his pieces so that they can attack those pawns or those squares. Those pawns or those squares, it doesn't matter. He's going to attack or put his pieces on those squares. So he starts off, Amos Byrne plays bishop d1. Alekhine moves the king over because he realizes, he probably knows by now, that the best defender of weak pawns is the king. The king is going to do a good job of defending this guy and this guy. And it's better for the king to do that, because what else is the king going to do? Okay, now Amos begins attacking the weak squares and their pawns on those weak squares with knight g4. This is good. I like this. Just look at the next few moves. He plays knight g4, Black plays h5, and he goes back to e3. So it looks like he's wasting time, but he's not actually wasting time. What he's doing is he's creating more weak squares. h6 is still a weak square. Now g5 is a weak square. It can't be protected by a pawn. So he's going to try to infiltrate on those squares, and he can attack g6. g6 now is a fixed target. It's fixed because it can't move. It's stuck. It's stuck there. It's a sitting duck. That's what I want to say. It's a sitting duck. And he'll be able to attack it. Okay. So that's what he does. He maneuvers the knight to attack g6, but more importantly to put it on g5, to put it on a better square f3. Okay. And that's what he does. Okay, here he starts moving the king over to the queen side. Makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense for him to do that. This is the helplessness that, well, not the helplessness. This is helplessness. From Black's point of view, Black can't do anything. He can only improve his pieces to a certain amount. Like, he can put his king there, but his knight's as good as it's going to be. And White can get rid of that knight. The king has dreams. The king has some serious dreams of going and infiltrating and attacking this backwards pawn. Black doesn't have that same dream. Black doesn't have that dream. He can't attack c3. He's not going to attack f4. How's he going to do that? He would have to go here, then here, then here. That's crazy. He can't do that. Not with these weak squares. Not with this one and this one. And like I said, pawns happen to be on those weak squares. He can't attack this guy either. How? It's just going to be impossible. He doesn't have any entry. All right, so you can tell that. You can tell that Black is passive. He's the defensive side. He's the defender because he doesn't have the options that White has. So Black kind of plays some waiting moves. Can't do much. He plays the knight back because, let's see, was this a threat? For example, if he plays bishop e8, yeah, let's look at that. If he plays bishop e8, well, then he can play this. And if he tries to do a discovery because his bishop is unprotected, Like let's say he tries this. It doesn't work because bishop e8 comes with check. He has to take. And now white's up a piece. So it doesn't work. That's why he moved back. Now let's say he moves someplace like g7. Well, then he can still do it. He can still play here. And if he tries the discovery again, he loses the e6 pawn. So things are not working out. It's not a coincidence. When you have a bad position, tactics aren't going to go in your favor. Most of the time. It's like a law. It's like a law in chess. So in the game, he played knight a7. White continued improving his king. And now he trades. This is the good thing about having a mobile bishop. You can decide when you want to trade it off. And here it's a perfect moment to trade it off. What he's going to do, because the knight is covering this square, so the king couldn't enter. And if he tried to enter, if he had tried to enter this way, well then that would have run into a discovery with something like knight e5 or knight d4. So he trades it off, and this is good. He's going to get a classic good knight versus bad bishop. Attacks g6, makes the king go to f7, and now he trades his good bishop. He had a good bishop, but it doesn't mean that you can't trade it off. What's left on the board, Bobby Fischer said this, what's left on the board is more important than what has been traded. It was something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And this is rough because black can't do anything on the dark squares. He's defenseless. He can't do anything. He can't do anything to prevent this. All these dark squares are just totally weak. And a weakness on the dark squares means a weakness on the light squares, because eventually that activity that white has on the dark squares is going to carry over. Is going to carry over it to the light squares. All right, and now he gets the knight on g5, which is a weak square, and he's got a lot of mobility in black's territory. He could play something like knight h7, and then knight f6. White can play, and his king can play king c5, and then to d6. So he's being stretched. He's being stretched to the maximum. He's being attacked on both sides. Eventually, something's going to crumble. He can't ward off both pieces. He can't ward off attackers from both sides. It reminds me of I had a blitz game where I was talking about spreading my opponent out. And what I meant by that, I didn't really explain what I meant by that. But what I meant by that was I'm creating threats on both sides of the board. And he won't be able to cover those threats. It's like the game Twister. Twister is a game where you play it on a rug. It's like a carpet, and you have a spinner, and you spin the spinner. For example, it'll land on a green circle for your right leg. So you have to put your right leg on a green circle, and then it might say the same thing for your left arm, and you have to twist your body, you have to contort yourself. Eventually, if you keep on spinning and spinning, you're going to get into a position that's so awkward. You're like, I can't move. I can't do anything. If I move, then I'm going to fall over. That's what happens. Person is like being stretched and twisted and contorted, and then he can't hold on to it. He's going to get tired, and then he's just going to fall. And that's what happens in chess. You spread your opponent out, put him in weird positions, make him contort his body in strange ways, and then he's just going to plop over. That's what happens in this game. All right, so bishop c6. In the game, he played king a3, and then he was a little bit indecisive. He still ended up winning, but I like this move right here, h4. This is a good move. Normally, you don't want to push your pawns and take away mobility from your own pawns and pieces without a really good reason. But here, white has a really good reason. His idea is going to be to sacrifice this pawn. It's going to be to sacrifice, just like with the bishop. You know, the good thing about having a good bishop is that you can trade it off at the right moment. The good thing about having a pawn with mobility is you can trade it off or sacrifice it when you want. And it's not like it, yeah, okay. So let's just check out how this works. Let's say the bishop goes back to d7. We're not yet ready to play king c5 because we're going to give him this square. We're going to give that a4 square to his bishop. So first, it makes sense to improve our knight as much as we can before we do anything committal. So we put the knight on f6. He can't stop that. He can't do anything. He can't stop us from doing that. And we are attacking d5 and h5. Yes, they're being protected by pawns, but we're going to distract one of the pawns with f5. Now we go in because we've improved our knight as much as we could. And here we finally sacrifice our pawn. If he takes with the e-pawn, let's look at that. So he takes with the e-pawn. Now we take, and this is going to be bad. Well, it's already bad. Yeah, it's already losing. This is a huge winning weapon. Double connected or connected passers. Connected passers are a strong way to win a game. It's very easy. Here, black doesn't have that kind of. He has a passer, but it can't move. It's being blockaded. White will have an easy time moving those pawns up the board. And then if we go back, if he takes with the g-pawn, we'll take the h-pawn, and we're spreading him out because he has to worry about this pawn now. For example, let's say he puts the bishop on d1, attacks us. We go back to f4, hitting the backwards pawn, and supporting the h5 thrust. After h5, what is he going to do? How is he going to stop the pawn? He can try bringing the king over, but that works into what we want him to play. We'll be able to play king d6 and then take on e6. Actually, we wouldn't even have to do that. We could just take immediately. We can just keep marching the pawn up and then take on e6. And it's a winning position. Let's just see that. Let's say he goes here. We play h6. If he lets us play h7, then we're going to advance. So he has to play here. We don't have to play here immediately. We can just keep it there. And now we play king d6. And we're going to get a similar situation to what we just saw. White's going to take on e6. Let's say something like this. He's going to take on e6. And then he's going to take on d5. Or he doesn't even have to. You can just bring the knight back to f4 and start pushing this pawn. And he's been spread out. As much as, yeah, he can't even hold. He's just plopped over. He's fallen. So that's what happened. That was the evolution. Not the evolution. That was how the position morphed. It morphed. If we go back to this position right here, it might look equal. It might look equal to some players. They might say, oh, it's black can hold this position. But it's going to be terribly difficult because white's the one with the spinner. White's the one, and he doesn't have to spin. He doesn't have to, on the game twister, he doesn't have to keep spinning. Black does. Eventually, black's going to have to make so many spins. Yeah, he could probably do it. Really flexible. It's like a gymnast. If you're a really good player, you're a gymnast, and you could contort yourself into weird positions. But eventually, something's got to give. Because all white's going to do is he's going to keep on letting you spin and spin and spin, and then you're going to be in a position that's so weird that you're just going to fall over. And he did it masterfully by creating those weak squares in black's territory. And then he couldn't hold on to everything. He had to worry about these weak squares, then these weak squares, and he couldn't do it. So it's almost like invisible. You look at it, you're like, oh, it looks okay. But once you see the things like you see that white can attack black's weak squares, but black can't do that to white because he's stuck passively defending everything. well, then you'll say, whoa, that's pretty cool. How he was able to play positionally. He was able to get a big advantage and then convert it. All right, so I guess that concludes Amos Byrne versus Alexander Alekhine. Please follow me on Twitter at Squarology. And I'll see you on Chess.com. Bye.